All right, great. Okay, a very good morning, everyone. Good morning, fellow members of the audience. I am Javan Seow from the Tembusu College with the National University of Singapore. And with me, I am supervised by Jock, who is my NSM lecturer from the Center for English Language and Communication, also from NUS. So today I'll be sharing a piece of writing that I'm doing right now. It is on the Chinese 对不起 and 抱歉 versus the English sorry. And I would love if I would be able to get comments and feedbacks from all of you guys. And if it's possible, maybe you can input those comments onto the chat box below. Thank you so much. So first, I move on to the context. So in English, speakers say sorry when they are apologizing. So this is a very common speech act that we use every single day in our conversations. However, in Mandarin, there are multiple ways that a speaker can use to respond in situations where an English speaker would say sorry. So two of such ways are saying 对不起 and 抱歉, which both can be glossed as sorry in English. So I've included a study by Cynthia Lee 2009 at the bottom, where she illustrated the meaning of several Chinese words, and two of which are 对不起 and 抱歉. And as we can see, both can be glossed as sorry. And even if 抱歉 bears the additional information such as feel apologetic or regret, it doesn't capture the meaning of these phrases accurately, and it doesn't distinguish between the two of them accurately as well. So as such, I'll be using the natural semantic meta language, something that I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with, to try and distinguish the differences in the meanings between 对不起 and 抱歉. And the data of use will be sourced from the Leeds Chinese Internet corpus as well as the Zhonghua Yuan corpus. So first, I'd like to move on to the first word, which is 对不起 and its examples of use. And on this slide, I'd like to direct everyone's attention to the yellow highlights in this slide. So as we can see, the utterance of 对不起 generally follows the utterance of 我错了, which is I am wrong or it is my fault in Chinese. So while this is only a few examples from a lot of examples, the utterance of 我错了 is not something which is present in every utterance of 对不起. However, in those situations, the speaker would then explain the reason as to why they are apologizing in the first place, as to why they say 对不起. So hence, I then conclude that 对不起 is typically used with an admission of fault, where the speaker says, I'm sorry, I am wrong because I did so and so, or perhaps without the I am wrong, I am sorry because my attitude was poor, or I'm sorry that I made you angry, and so forth. So next, I'd like to address something that is very interesting, that is regarding the addressee and speaker relationship in terms of 对不起. So as you can see from the first example, it is uttered from a boy to his older brother. The second, it is from a student to his teacher. And at the third, it is from a worker to his superior. And this is interesting because it tends to follow a certain pattern. It is typically used to addressees whom the speaker respects, so usually someone of a higher status. It is also typically used to whom the speaker knows well. So this could be someone close to the speaker, such as perhaps a sibling, a parent, or so even a teacher, and it could be with someone whom the speaker has worked with a long time and developed a closer relationship, such as a worker to his superior. So however, at the last example, a girl apologizing to her friend, arguably that is a relationship where both of them are at the same level. So however, before I posited that it's typically used towards addressees whom are of a higher status. So in these situations, it is an exception because when the fault that is committed by the speaker is to a level that is so severe, to a level that is so high, it warrants a more sincere or a more extreme apology, and hence 对不起 can be used towards addressees who is of a higher status or who is of a lower status. In this case, the addressee and addresser relationship is not clear. However, in all the other common instances, it is always typically used towards someone of a higher status. So next, I then come to the NSM explication of 对不起. So 对不起, I know now that I did something bad to you. I know that you can feel something bad towards me now. I want you to know that I feel something bad because of this. And I want you not to feel something bad towards me if you can. So the first part of the explication, I know now I did something bad to you. This highlights that duibuqi is used typically in an admission of fault, that I know that I directly did something which is bad to you. The next part, I know that you can feel something bad towards me now. This is a very typical expectation. I am apologizing to you because I know that because of the thing that I've done to you, you may feel something bad towards me. And at the same time, I want you to know that I feel something bad as well. Because of whatever I've done to you, I feel bad for making you angry, or I feel bad for coming late to this very important meeting. And finally, I want you not to feel something bad towards me if you can. So this highlights that when I say duibuqi, I am hoping that if you can feel something less, you can feel less bad towards me, because it is expected that when I've done something bad to you, you would feel something bad against me. Perhaps you'll be very angry, you'll be very upset at me, or you're very disappointed at me. But with me saying duibuqi, I'm hoping that you can feel less of that towards me if you can. Okay, next I then move on to the next phrase, 抱歉, and bearing in mind the comparisons that I'm going to make with 对不起. So in this slide, I've highlighted the reasons as to why the speaker is saying 抱歉 in these instances, and this is something that they articulated. So in the first one, first example, the worker is informing his client that his time is up. So the second one, the worker is apologizing for interrupting his colleagues as he has something that he really needs to discuss with them right now. So the third one is a doctor informing his patients that their medical condition is beyond the scope of his specialization. And finally, it is a doctor apologizing for startling and waking up a patient because he has to give the patient a general physical exam. So in these instances, we can see also from the explanation that the speaker themselves have given that in these cases, it is not a case where the speaker has offended the addressee. It's not a case whereby the fault tied to 抱歉 in this case is something that is as severe or as serious as when the fault is being tied to 对不起. In such cases, we can see that even it may be argued that the speaker has not done anything that is actually a fault, such as I go to the third example where the doctor is informing his patient that their medical condition is beyond the scope of his specialization. That is something that is beyond the control of the doctor. However, if this is a case where the doctor is able to see to this patient, but perhaps he didn't want to because he was late for the meeting, or perhaps due to certain negligence, then he would very likely use the term 对不起 instead of using 抱歉. So hence I conclude that 抱歉 is typically not an admission of fault, unlike 对不起. So next, I then like to address something about the addressee and speaker relationship. So bearing in mind the comparisons once again. So as you can see, the first one is from a restaurant owner to his two customers. The second one is from a doctor to a patient. Third one is from a professor to a reporter. And the fourth one is from a worker to his colleagues. So in this case, we can see that it is 抱歉 is typically used towards addressees who are of a lower status. So, and typically used towards someone whom the speaker do not know well. So the speaker is someone that's possibly a stranger or someone we have only seen the first time. So this is interesting because for 对不起 it is typically used towards someone of a higher status, but then for 抱歉 it's typically used towards addressees who are of a lower status. So we can see perhaps that while these addressee and speaker relationships are not embodied within the NSM explication, they are actually spelled out in the cultural scripts in the paper, which is not included in this presentation. So I then come to the NSM explication of 抱歉. So 抱歉, I know now that because of me, something bad happened to you. I do not think it is very bad. At the same time, I want you to know that I feel something bad because of this, and I don't want you to feel something bad towards me if you can. So first, I'd like to highlight the similarities between the explications for 抱歉 对不起, which lies on the last two lines, so the third and fourth line, that I want you to know that I feel something bad because of this, and I don't want you to feel something bad towards me if you can. However, bearing in mind that because 抱歉 cannot be constituted as an apology, as there is not an admission of fault, whereby in 对不起 it can be considered as an apology because it's it typically follows an admission of fault. However, it is the same here, as I feel something bad. I can feel something bad because of something bad happening to you. So that is something that I acknowledge when I say 抱歉. And finally, I don't want you to feel something bad towards me, not because I am seeking for a forgiveness, or not because I know that you can be upset or disappointed, but with the understanding that this is something out of my control. It is not my fault that something bad has happened to you. So then I move on to the first two parts, which is different from 对不起, is firstly that I know now because of me something bad happened to you, and this is direct. It's a direct opposite different from 对不起, where it is more direct, that where the explication is just I've done something bad to you. So in this case, 抱歉 is I'm acknowledging that yes, perhaps because of me, or perhaps because of certain circumstances, something bad has happened to you. However, that is not a fault on my part. So this is the main difference. And next, I do not think it is very bad. So in this kind of situations where 抱歉 is used, the fault associated with it, or perhaps the thing that has happened towards the addressee, is something that is not very bad to, which is something that we will see when we use 对不起. So typically with 对不起, it is something that's very bad, and with something that we have done directly towards the addressee, which is a big fault. So then in summary, I like to put the two words side by side and look at its differences more clearly. So firstly, for 对不起, the addressee is typically someone who is above the addresser, whereas for 抱歉, the addressee is typically someone who is below the addresser. And then next, the addressee is typically someone whom the addresser knows well. And for 抱歉, the addressee is typically someone whom the addresser does not know well. And finally, perhaps the most important difference is that 对不起 is an admission of fault, while 抱歉 is not an admission of fault. So lastly, I would like to contrast these two words with the English sorry. So the meaning of sorry on the left is taken from a paper by the speaker. And it's stated here, I feel something bad now because I think I did something, it was bad for you. So this is similar to the meaning of 对不起, and I argue that 对不起 is actually the word that is more commonly associated with sorry, whereas 抱歉 is a word that has a meaning that is very, very different from sorry. So we can see the similarities highlighted in blue and green, where in sorry, it's I did something bad. I did something and it was bad for you. And in 对不起, I did something bad to you. So this is very similar. And also, I feel something bad is something that is actually universal across all these three words. So finally, I come to 抱歉, where I do not think it is very bad. So this explication is actually very unique to 抱歉 and it's not found in 对不起 and sorry. So I argue that 抱歉 is actually has a meaning that is more distinct to sorry. So, and with that, I come to the end of my sharing, and thank you all for your attention, and I'd like to open the floor to questions now. Thank you so much.